guys. Ginger and James here.
Hi.
Uh, James has got something he wants to talk to us about, so we're going to be very quiet and let him speak. Um, all right, and then we'll say our bits towards it. So go ahead. You've got the stage, James.
Hey, this world has been totally reversed on everything we've been told. So imagine you've got something like the British Empire at its height of its power, but the British Isles suddenly sinks without a trace. So you're just left with the larger colonies and lots of smaller ones, and how they would develop depending on how much communication and how much they remained in contact with each other would also determine what would happen. So I've been piecing bits together, and I've sent a link to a book called Irish Wisdom Preserved in Bible and Pyramid. And the picture that emerges from this, if you go back to the sort of the Plato story, that you've got 5 races, and they've all gone off in what's left of them have gone off in different directions. It looks as if Atlantis was destroyed over a 20-year period, and things happen twice a year. So you get hit with something, fireballs or whatever, or a comet, and then there's a top up in 6 months, and then another one a year later, and another top up, shall we say? And it's like, that's a familiar looking pattern. So you've got a 20-year period, 40 destruction events. So you've got 2040 being implied, which is a phoenix year. But what also comes out of this, and I feel it's where you've got descriptions of the Aryan race, it's actually Era, the old name for Ireland. And they took the sciences and the arts and the sort of knowledge of things and sort of held it there as long as they could. And so you can see evidence of this when you go right down into South America. You've got Quetzalcoatl, and he's got a cross. Anybody that was killed by a snake bite got a cross on their sort of marker. An interesting word that also comes out is the word Hebrew. It comes from Gaelic, which means fire, but it also means someone from the other side. So it's not someone you're normally in contact with, but part of this Atlantis civilization, but they're from the other side. So from a perspective of a Gaelic, which are the Phoenicians, it just means again, the first part, Finn, it's the Irish name of the sun. So it just basically means seafarer. So they would have been in contact with the rest of what was left of the Atlantis civilization. So from a perspective of, say, an Aztec, someone who was Gaelic from Era would be a Hebrew, and likewise from the perspective of somebody from Ireland, someone from South America or North America would be described as a Hebrew. And a lot of these North American tribes claim that they are Hebrews, and even the earliest Portuguese and Spanish that documented what they found said they've got some strange customs in Peru that are exactly the same as Hebrew. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So doing a sort of looking, so I listened to this book. It's Irish Wisdom Preserved in Bible and Pyramids by Conor McDarry in 1923. So you've got this sun worship and personification of the sun as like it's a spiritual story. And then when you look at Mayan, Aztec, Toltec, that's all sun worship. When you get to Egypt with the pyramids, that's connected with sun worship. Christianity is connected with sun worship. Then you've got the whole linguistic tie-up. So Gaelic shares 452 common words with Hebrew. Then you've got, what else we got here? I made a few notes.
That's
So
bizarre.
Rome,
452 words in common. Because Gaelic, there's not a lot of words in Gaelic, is there? It's not a very wordy language. There's a lot of words that mean the same thing.
well, this is the legacy of what's been going on for a very, very long time.
And they stopped everybody speaking Gaelic too. They stopped teaching it in the schools and stopped allowing people to teach it. I mean, I went many years ago, I went to Ireland to stay with an Irish family in, I think it was County Kerry. But the local community all spoke Gaelic. They didn't speak English. All of them. With each other, they spoke Gaelic. In the pub, they spoke Gaelic. But it's just like, and this is like probably 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Sorry, I'm distracted. Carry on.
That all ties in. Of all the countries of Europe, I think it's fair to say that Ireland has been decimated more than any other one. And part of the reason for that, and part of the reason they were kept in ignorance and not allowed to read the Bible under the Roman Catholic Church, is because it would be too obvious that the Gaelic origins of the words are contained in all the names, all the place names. So, for example, Rome, which was a colony of this Church of Iessa in Ireland, it comes from, the first part is Ro, which means before, and Orm, which means body, earth, or grave. Hence the eternal city of Rome, as they call themselves. So basically, you've got this usurping religion that has come from the east, which is going westward, and its sort of rival that it wants to sort of steal and misappropriate everything from is, I would say, is this ancient spirituality from what would have been Atlantis that has been preserved in Ireland. I mean, if you've got a 20-year period of distractions, you've got plenty of time to think, hang on, this is getting a bit serious here. I think we need to relocate some of the things. But of course, it's not one distraction. It's been a series of distractions. So you've had the Roman invasion of Britain, which didn't actually get as far as they wanted. They couldn't achieve what they wanted to achieve. Also, in the meantime, you've had earthquakes in Europe, which will have affected that. But the one and only time in history there's been an English Pope was this Nicholas Breakspere. And it's like, oh, is that where they got the name Shakespeare from? And he was selected to be Pope to be an influence on Henry II. So the way they work is to, same system they've got today. You filter people through education. You pick the ones that are going to be lured by greed. So you can offer them, well, if you do this for us, you can keep so much of whatever you take. And because there was no war between England and Ireland, they've also confused this by blurring the names and things. So Picts, Scots, and Irish are not separate, or were never separate people at one time. But this is done.
The other thing that they've promoted is this division by religion that comes through. It comes through football. It comes through everything. You know, it's just like, and it's predominantly in the UK. It doesn't happen really elsewhere in the world. But in the UK, there's this Catholic Protestant sort of hatred going on, but it's sort of underlying, and they make it sound like it's like, I don't know, English versus Irish that hate each other, but it actually wasn't. It was actually Protestant Catholic, and it stems back to years ago.
They do this worldwide. We
Yeah.
have north-south streets. We have east-west streets. It's on a micro and a macro level that they divide us because that's how they conquer us. It's an old saying, but it's quite true. And if they keep us sort of competing with one another now, the sports, you know, even on a small scale, we're competing with different parts of our community. How can we build a community when we're against each other? Opposing forces, like the opposite ends of the battery, if you will.
That's a tactic that they've definitely used over and over again. So where do we go from here? Yeah, so you've got certain words that come from Gaelic, like all, which is roots, universe, great, mighty, a race, a generation. So it's describing all. So a name like Abraham is the father of nations, but the AB part is an N from Gaelic, which means father. And then you've got son and Ham. I'm going with, or the closest I can find, it comes from the German word Heim, which means home in the sense of the heart. So it's basically father, son, mother being expressed in that name. So whereas you've got the remnants of Atlantis that are trying to bring enlightenment and bring knowledge back, and you can see that with all the stories in South America about this feathered serpent who's teaching them knowledge. Now, from the descriptions of I think it's the Aztecs I think it was a Portuguese writer. He's carried about everywhere. His feet are never in contact on the ground. He's completely covered in white feathers. He's a plumed serpent. So this is where you get the whole thing of Jesus, because they've taken Iesa, which is this personification of this sun god, and substituted for the eye of the jade. This is where you've got this missing 1,000 years. It's like, well, who'd ever heard of this war from this Church of Rome against this Church of Ireland? Now, the center of this Church of Ireland and the source of the Bible and everything is a place called Tara. Hence, you've got Tartan, Tartaria, because Tar means west. So if you're spreading out and taking this knowledge all across Europe, you're on the western edge of Europe. And you can see one of their sort of greatest temples. So this would have probably gone back to an earlier time before the destruction of Atlantis. You have the Great Pyramid of Giza. So it's corrupted from the Aisa again. You've also got this trying to find a new route to the east. Now the ones that actually blocked that was Rome. It wasn't the Arab nations that were causing the problem. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they knew exactly what they were doing when they went out to the West Indies and called them Indian, just to add to the confusion. But Indian, if you break it down, it's in, die, and an. An is on, which is light, but it's killing the light inside all of us. So they, after annihilating Ireland, it's now let's go for the Americas and divide the North and the South for a start. Let's go straight for the Caribbean. You notice you've got the word Arab in Caribbean. Think of the color of Carib as well. It's a description of the darkest skinned tribes, because when we're talking about Indians, especially in North America, you've got a representation of all shades from the darkest to the lightest. So it's an attack on everybody.
And it's also the same name. I mean, they've used this Indian name for different tribes, and then the Indian name, like for the Indians in the turban wearing India, the place, you know. They've used the same name. Why would they use the same name?
Well,
and Columbus that was said to have found India. He was in search of India. So there is some speculation that North America was always known as India. And so we did have three Indias, East, West, and India.
Wow.
Well, they definitely knew about the Americas. Columbus's first voyage, there was an Irish navigator called William of Dublin who showed him the way. The Irish had been going there for at least 1,000 years before. They are the Phoenicians, they are the sea people. They're on the coast of the Atlantic. They've got numerous bays and things, so they would have been experts in this navigation. Then you've got other things coming in, like using Olaf of Norway, who basically said to his people, well, you've got two choices. You can either fight in the battles or convert to Christianity, because he'd been bribed. So now you've got the Viking invasions. This is all attempts to get this Church of Ireland, to destroy it. So once you've destroyed that, driven the Moors out of Spain in 1491, now it's war parties going over to the Americas to destroy and change and annihilate any memory of this same universal religion. So this is where we get Tartaria from, the Westerners. It comes with a remnant of the center of this entire civilization was Tara in Ireland, which is Tara Hill today. And surprisingly, you're not allowed to dig or investigate it. I wonder why.
That's something that the most recent former president of the United States, he's connected to that also. It was a big part of his history, I think. It might be the name of one of his homes. His mother is connected to that area, I believe. So there is something else that might be of interest for people interested in learning more about Tara, who might have an interest in that type of media.
Well, where I disagree with this book is saying this is very sort of pro Ireland was the center of it all, and that's saying that Plato and Atlantis is a fiction that was made up by these those that have rewritten history. I mean, it should also be borne in mind there's a thing called the Roman nodes, so that might give you a clue as to who these people really are. And interestingly, they're heading west, chasing a setting sun, whereas this Atlantic civilization is heading towards a rising sun. So by keeping that trade route closed across land and then heading west under the pretense of finding a new route to India, it gives them time to change the history of the Middle East and then apply the names of places in North America. I mean, if you look on a modern map of North America, look how many Athens there are. And that's because Greek comes from Crete. If you take the River Nile, flip it over, turn it upside down, it overlays perfectly over the Mississippi, and you've got the word ISIS in Mississippi. Now, I've got this information from Old World Florida channel. There's also Karimio Ahu, who's he's done loads of videos on the Americas.
He's brilliant. He's brilliant.
Yeah.
He's a great resource for this truth movement.
He also shows the other deception that's gone on. So as well as annihilating and murdering throughout Central and South America initially, it's now grabbing what was slaves. You've also got these so-called Nubian pharaohs. They're actually from sort of the Mexico area. They've used that image and transplanted it across. Then you've also got this thing called indentured servitude. So it sounds like a really good idea in a way. It's like, well, there's new land, we need people out there, so to pay for your passage by ship, there was a Scottish Florida West India trading company who were involved in a lot of this. And it's actually European people, particularly the Irish and also the English, what would be classed as undesirables, the poor and also all the felons.
Well, they were felons because they were starving and they were often found to be stealing a chicken for dinner. You know, I mean, we have to really read the fine lines. And they looked for reasons to take children. You know, like we didn't stand a chance. They came for us. We were under attack. And I think one of the reasons we were under attack in that area is because what we know as Atlantis is actually Atland, and it's well documented in the Oera Linda book. And the stories of the survivors are there. And I just thought I'd better check and make sure I'm not muted. Yeah, I think it's very important that we look at Kuramio's work, what you're saying, James, as well as the information that's being brought forward by Jan Ott, who is one of the publishers of the Oera Linda book. I think it's all connected because I think that those victims of that flood out in Atland, near Doggerland, and near the Faroe Islands, you know, mostly populated by, I'm going to call them pharaohs. You know, it is what it is. We have it all mapped out for us. And then Stephen Beatty, to bring him back into it, his story ties in there too. I think our true history is there and just seconds away from being revealed to all of us. And this is what they're most afraid of. Because when we come to realize that we did agree to this indentured servitude, and we did think that it was a good deal. And when we look at the way that they treated our ancestors were forbidden to speak about this. They were sworn to secrecy. All of our ancestors were, all of the influencers of our history were, in my opinion, orphans who were indoctrinated. And that's it. And they were used to tell the story, including Columbus, like all these individuals, Shakespeare, they're fake. They're fake. There was a script written. These were the actors used. They were indoctrinated from an early age because they were traumatized and stolen and put to work. They were no longer indentured. They were enslaved.
One of the points as well with that is so many of these people that wrote the histories came from orphans.
Correct.
So many of them, you look at all of them and they all talk about orphans, and they all refer as being orphans themselves. So where were the adults?
And Disney takes out all the mamas. You know, there's no mothers in those movies. Yeah, they're all about orphans. All about, you know, it's, and it takes me back to the Cabbage Patch too. You know, it's they're coming for your kids, and if you think they're not, I got news for you. You know, because it's big business to control us. We're still enslaved. That's the big secret of the day. We're still enslaved when we're paying 80+% of our tax. You know, 80% of our income or more goes to taxation, and for what? You know, our services in this country are sunk. We've got a problem. But we see the reason that we have a problem. We were once quite vulnerable after that flood, I feel.
I mean, I have an opinion about the flood that it was far sooner than the way it's depicted.
I agree.
Yeah, like it's probably 500 years ago or something like that. But as against a long time ago, it's probably only 400-500 years ago, the big flood. And I agree with, was it Stephen?
Stephen Beatty.
Stephen
J.D. Beatty.
Yeah, so Stephen Beatty was talking about was that the UK after the flood was broken up into small partition islands. And I don't know, it just resonated with me with what he said. I don't know why, but it just resonated.
He's done his work.
Yeah.
He's done his work. I've seen him over the years offering so much information. It's undeniable. It's right there for us to look at. And, you know, the stories that they share us are missing the details. So much of it is just headlines. And when you really look, you'll find orphans behind the headlines that don't really have the ability to speak. They're told what to say. They're scripted.
Yeah. So with the Oriolinda, that's basically comes from the concept that their civilization was in the North Atlantic, and that civilization sunk, that island sunk.
Correct.
It wasn't Atlantis. There was another civilization that they interrelated with, called, as you say, Atlant.
Okay.
And that civilization also sunk when this flood came along.
And it's all in the Atlantic. I mean, doesn't that make sense?
Mm,
When we look at the etymology of words so much, how can we ignore that?
mm.
And like you said, the North Atlantic. Well, we, the North, are under the attack.
So there
And
was a
James is right about the Irish. Irish, Aryan, Ireland, Aryan. Do you see? The Aryan race.
one of go on, James.
Does that make sense? Air is always associated, the air element is always associated with spirit. So the spiritual teaching, it would make sense that that would go. And look, I mean, you look at how fertile Ireland is and how that would also be where grains and things would have probably been developed. And then, because this is one of the central things with Quetzalcoatl, and by all the other name for him is Amaru. So this is where you get America. So you've also got your car, because in
There it is,
Egyptian
yeah.
they tell us the car is the parts of the soul on earth, and the bar is the part that is like by itself. So you can almost see Amaru Ka. So it's the earthly body of Amaru, and obviously anybody that would be like a representation, like a high priest, would probably all wear these white feathers. Hence, the North American Indians always shown in Wild West films with the headpieces with all the feathers. And clearly, Columbus and the rest knew instantly when they saw this, it's like, we've got a problem here. Because the other pattern that emerges, anybody that has any esoteric wisdom, the mystery schools and things, they're murdered, then they're turned into martyrs and flipped over, and it's, oh no, they're a saint of this Roman usurper religion, whereas actually they were the ones that probably stood in the way, the Gnostics, the Cathars. I mean, they've just annihilated anybody that they feel opposed.
The witches. I couldn't contain it for some reason.
Manipulated things so witches are seen as something as evil, rather than being healers. It's all part of this ongoing sort of plan. But I mean, when you get into there was no slavery in North America. It was all indentured servants. This comes from Karimio Aho. There was 20 Negro indentured servants who became slave owners, and they treated their slaves the same way. I mean, it was luck of the draw. If you got your indentured servitude with a decent person, you would then go on to have your land. But a bit of bribery to an official, to a judge in your local town, and trumps up charges and accusations against your indentured servant, you extend their time of service, so it ends up as lifelong. So basically it morphs into slavery. But they've been very clever to use the darkest skinned Indians and class them as Negro to totally confuse everything. And then it's been morphed and manipulated. So between about 1790 and 1830, you start seeing the Negroes are losing rights and privileges. Although they're free men, they've got to get permission to travel. It's like, oh, that's got sort of recent echoes to that again. It's like the same script, repeat pattern. So they've actually then started to shift things. So this divide and conquer, oh, you're white skinned. Now you're no longer, I mean, how many of European descent would be happy with the idea of finding out that actually their ancestor was a slave? I mean, Abraham Lincoln is another example, but he's probably of tribal descent. People have mentioned about how he's got quite dark skin, his high cheekbones, he's got the very blue eyes, and there is one of those tribes has very blue eyes in North America. So they've really sort of muddled things up to keep this deception, this mass deception going, and everything done behind closed doors. I mean, if you think about it, they'd say with science it's peer-reviewed papers. Well, is that not what the Bible is? You've got like the Council of Nicaea deciding what papers are acceptable, what are not. So you've got a peer-reviewed paper with religions as well. And then, of course, you can cash in on it further by
two of North America's most trusted scientists are actually not scientists. They're both actors. I'm talking about Bill and Neil. And, you know, people can figure the rest out. They get the highest rating. They're both paid actors. You know, they're influencers. They're trying to influence society to think that the actual witchcraft that we should be concerned with, you know, the rituals that we have in the church, you know, the language that we speak, the cursive writing that they indoctrinated us with, the spelling,
the
brainwashing, you know. And now that we're realizing all of this is why I say, how can we go back and do what we've always done? There's no going back. We have to create. We have to move forward from this. And I don't know for sure how to do that, but I do see what you're saying, James. It's absolutely your truth. You're right. And I think the story is well told in our language. So you were saying about Hebrew, and I wrote down Hebrides, not sure why. And Iberian came to mind. So just to share with you what I was thinking of there, Hebrew and Peru, quite similar sounding. And again, the Ireland, Aryan, you know, it's all in our language. But we have to then look at the history of our language. Where does that word actually come from? And so much of what we're now indoctrinated with and are asked to hold a mirror up to, because you're right, everything that we are told is wrong is not wrong. It's important for us to look at the script and see, well, now, follow the money. Why are they telling me this? What do they want me to believe? Why will I believe that? We have to become more critical thinkers and question these people that we've come to trust as scientists and leaders. You know, who are these people anyway? But indoctrinated orphans.
A sort of very recent thing, maybe over the last 200 years, you can see a sort of pattern. I mean, if you compare English and American English, how there's been a split off. So there's slightly different words like highway, motorway, pavement and sidewalk. It's already started to split, and that's with communication between. So imagine if you've lost communication, but we're not talking about one flood. I mean, I've looked at Jason Archaic's channel's chronology, and it does check out. I've done various things myself. So he's saying three of what would be the real big floods. You've got 2239 BC, 1687, and then 721. But there's other events in between. So there's one around about, I think it's 523. Well, 525 or 526 is when the Anno Domini calendar is concocted.
That's the date that makes the most sense to me. And then you're getting a little closer to the year 666, which is where I feel we went a complete about face. And I think that this is the year of the ego. I think that that's the year that we added 1,000 years. I think that that's when our story was rewritten and we became enslaved, not indoctrinated, not indentured, but enslaved. If we were indentured, we still had freedoms. When we were enslaved, we no longer had the freedom. We think we're free, but we're not. And I want to share also, Carmio talks about, he did a video called The Black Irish. It's quite revealing the roots of these colonized countries. And, you know, when you look at Haiti, which, you know, they put it in the language there too. So it's in the Haiti, it's in the Dominican Republic, it's all around Trinidad, the West Indies, it's all in that area. They were all colonized places. And I do believe that the people that populated those colonies came from Ireland, and that catastrophic flood from 526. I think that's absolutely true. The year that they changed our year.
1526 or 526, and then
526.
Okay.
Yes.
And then they
And
added
then
1,000 years on in
that's been my
1666.
instinct. That's been my instinct for quite a long while.
Mm.
And the year 666, I feel the ego became present for us, evolutionary speaking in that way. We became more, our ego became more evolved. And, you know, perhaps they saw a need to control us in a different way, you know. So I feel like there was, you know, 666 is the number of carbon, they say, and we are carbon. Well, part of our being is to be crystalline and dual. And you know, how do they manage us? We're not all easy to manage.
Multifaceted, we're multifaceted too, you know. There's multi faces, there's multi expressions, there's multiple. I mean, we're not just one thing, we're many
I love
things.
that word. That word face, Kim, is important in sacred geometry as well.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the face of the triangle, the face of the, you know, face,
Yeah.
I think it's an important one for us to really dive into.
Yeah.
Ace comes to mind.
Yeah. Face, ace, and facet. Just put a T on the
Correct.
end and you've got face, ace, and facet all together. So
Correct.
multiple
Facetious.
multiple complexities. And I mean, I have to go back to that Star Wars movie and Princess Leia standing on the deck of the starship and saying, the more that you tighten your grip, Commander, the more the star systems will slip through your fingers. Because I think that we are really, really creative beings. And the more that we get trapped and the more that we get encased, the more that we fight for freedom, the more that we fight our way out, we find a way out, we find a crack. So that's when we become, I don't know, innovative and yeah. So sorry.
Well, that's the phoenix. That's the energy of the phoenix rising. We
Yeah.
have to find new solutions. We can't keep doing what we've always done. So, boom, like that, we shift. And this is a big month of shifting. Oh, I think most planets are moving into another house or another sign. We're going to feel it.
Well, the other thing is today's date is 3/3/2023. So it's
And
quite a
that adds up
significant
to
day.
13. It
Right.
adds up to 13. It is Friday. It is Freya's day here as I start my day. And so Friday the 13th, if you will.
It's Friday for
And
all of us.
correct.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay.
So, and the 13th card is death. And but I see death as a rebirth, you know, because that's just how it is. You know, from the seed of our thoughts, we rise as the phoenix.
Well, one thing that's becomes apparent with all of this, you've got what you could say is the good side is about creativity and sharing knowledge. The sort of, I'm going to call it Rome. That is about keeping people in the dark ages, keeping them in ignorance, so they can rewrite things. Because all these deciding what's going to be acceptable to go in the modern Bible and so on, it's always done behind closed doors in secret. But the other thing, while I think of it, Kim, didn't you? I think you said you're from the northeast, so you'd be familiar with Geordie.
I am a Geordie. Yeah. Yeah.
So something is saying to me, try and preserve, look at some of the old words, because that I'm sure will reveal even more to this.
Oh, the old Geordie's completely separate language. I mean, so many words in it that just don't relate to English at all. It's like they're completely. And then I've sometimes had conversations with people, Danish people, where I can talk to them in Geordie and they can understand me, and they can talk to me in Danish, and I can understand them if I'm thinking Geordie. So there's this
One of Jan, sorry, Kim, go ahead.
Go on. Just weird that there's this relationship. It's not the same with Swedish people or people from Finland, or it's only Danish people that we have that kinship with. And I know that the story is that the Danes came and invaded the north of England. And at that time, the north of England was very segregated. I mean, if you look at a map of England, I mean, I know there's this joke that says 100 years to an American is a long time. 100 miles to an English person or European person is a long way. So the fact that it's actually isolated, that area they call Geordie land, which is Sunderland, Newcastle, it's actually isolated from the rest of the place just by distance. But why? Like, there isn't any real reason why it would be isolated, if you get what I mean. It's obviously, it was probably an island. It was probably another island.
You've also got,
that's interesting.
I was going to say, you've also got in Sweden, when you get to the middle of the country, there's bilingual road signs. Now, the older version of Swedish, they can be perfectly understood by people in Iceland. So there's this huge sort of picture that sort of starts to emerge. Language is one of the most wonderful things. I mean, when you look at what Old World Florida has shown about the commonality of place names, that's like I've jokingly said about fluoride on Florida, but something that is florid, it's blooming, it's spreading out. You've got that Gulf Stream, and isn't it interesting? You've got the Gulf, but then you've got the Gulf War, you've got a mirror, you've got the Dead Sea, but then you've got Salt Lake. It's like they've taken something. This dark side does not seem to be able to create. They seem to only be able to take existing things and then rewrite them. But that
makes
gives
complete sense, because I mean, we've had conversations about, on one side you've got a creator, and then on the other side you've got a consumer.
Yeah.
Right? So the consumers are like the drones, the people that for want of a better expression, get on the mouse wheel, go to work 40 hours a week, then come home. They're too tired to be creative. They're done for because they've just worked too hard, getting to work and getting home from work. So then they buy everything that they need. They buy the food that they eat. They buy they buy the things that the creators are creating. But
well, what else that gives you? That's classic textbook to create codependency. Because how many of us can put their hand up and say, "Yeah, I grow my own food. I don't need anything at all from the system." They've made it in a way so you are dependent on the system.
yeah.
So you've got if you think about it, if you go to university, you run up student debt. Now you've got to take this fantastic job that earns lots of money to pay back the student loan. So you're an indentured servant even today. They just change the script slightly, but still play out the same repeat, like on the television as well. It's all repeat.
We are that cycle. We are the dragon chasing its tail, the snake chasing its tail. You know, it's all told in many mythologies. We just keep, we're going in circles, and until we can identify that, we can't choose the circle that we want. I keep calling it the hamster wheel, but it's repetition. And Kim, sorry I interrupted, but I got excited when you were talking about the languages. Could you spell Geordie? Is it Jordy?
No, it's IE. It's
J
G.
O
No, it's
J.
G
No,
G E
G.
O. Geordie.
Geordie, which reminds me of George, which is Saint
George
George, which is
George
quite
die. George die. For some reason.
George die is how you would pronounce it, or no, you say it Geordie, but it's pronounced it's spelled Geordie.
Geordie. Geordie, actually.
I'm reminded of George, like King or Saint George, and I'm reminded there of Templars, and because they use the same symbology, the red cross and or the white cross, or I think it was red. Sorry, I'm not too familiar with the story, but I think that that's relevant. I think it was Paul What the Flock did a great video about that recently, and might be of interest for learning more about the roots of that area. And also, Jan Ott, again, the publisher of the Aurora Linda book, is he's done an interview recently, and it's being transcribed in English, and there's closed captioning available for everybody in English so that we can at least read what they're saying in the podcast that he's participating in. And one thing that's quite interesting, as they review this language in their language, the Oera Linda language, which we know comes from the wheel and potentially created the Hebrew language, we know that he's saying that it's quite similar. So you're saying that the language of Geordie is this very similar in dialect to the Danish, and he is saying that it's quite similar to the Dane language is quite similar to the Oera Linda language.
So when I was trying to read the Oera Linda book, because it's two-sided. It's got I think I've showed you before on here, but it's got two. On one side, it's in English, and then on the other side, it's actually in the text of the script. And because Geordie's a phonetic language, if you read it and you pronounce it like phonetically, you read it like phonetic language. So if that makes any sense at all, it's very literal. It's not like with English, they put like weird, I don't know, weird pronunciations in there. So sometimes when you spell a word, it's not really, if you spelt it literally, it wouldn't sound like that word. Whereas the Oriolinda text, it sounds like the word because you read it phonetically. But it's really interesting from the point of view. I tried to read this book in that language, not in the English language. And I found that some of it I could actually read, but not all the time. And then I'd also heard that if you go to sleep with a book under your pillow, that you can actually your brain's got the capacity to actually interpret from that. I don't know whether that's true or not. I might sleep with that under my pillow tonight.
I think that's true. That was Edgar Casey's experience.
Yeah.
He, as a child, he remembered. He recounted a time where he was having trouble with studying, and he said, "Could I just take a nap on the book?" And he slept on it and understood everything brilliantly when he woke up. So his parents, from there, always allowed that and recognized his gift.
Do you know that? I mean, during my professional career, if you put me in a classroom, I would invariably fall asleep.
Same.
All the time.
I couldn't take it in. I could not take it in.
But once I fell asleep, I would wake up and I would know the information anyway. I wouldn't need to do further studying.
It's as though it lowered our resistance. You know, we were put in a less resistant state of being. I would fall asleep too. I mean, for me, it was not a good experience. I did not enjoy school.
No, me
and sleep was kind of an escape, but it also would lower our resistance and allow us to, move along with the rest of the flock.
I'm just reading this. Waralda was this is on the in their language side. Woralda, Woralda is like their god, and we were talking about this earlier as well, was the idea that Woralda actually represents world in if you look at that phonetically, Woralda, world.
Correct.
So that was their deity. That was their deity in there. So Woralda was of all things, and not all things skill win. Woralda is also, and this is it's in their language, it's also a Verg and High Vendrick. I don't know what that means. Nis Nawet Butahem. I'll look at the other side. That's the best part of him, it says. So
I like etymology because as you start to type in these words, you'll see a lot of other words come up. And if you can sort of get the gist of what these words mean just by looking at the energy or feeling the energy of the other words that are associated with it.
I like nutting it through. I like looking at a word and breaking it down and breaking what's in that word. Like, has it got eat in the word, or has it got, I like looking at words and going, wow, breath. Breath. Like, we're eating it.
I know.
We're eating the
Bach
B and the
Saga.
H.
Has anyone, I don't know if you've heard of Bach Saga. It's quite a story that was offered to us by a number of people, including the late Jim Chesney. And he talks about the origin of sound. He also has quite an interesting origin story. And he talks about hell, Helsinki, welcome to hell, Hel. And he talks about Helsinki being, Sinky, the water rose. And so he's got a very interesting story also, and explains phonetically so much of our language now, why. And it's very rudimentary but simple and obvious when you hear him explain it. And there's a few others involved that did some brilliant work and offered a lot of great information before he passed. So thank goodness for that, because he's had some very unusual experiences worth telling.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other one that just going back to what we were talking about earlier and talking about Atlantis and all the rest of it, many years ago, I read a book called The Camino by Shirley MacLaine.
Okay.
And what that story is based upon is based upon her real life experience of her walking the Camino. Now, for those of you that don't know what the Camino is it's a walking trail that runs from southern France to the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, and it's supposed to be in alignment with it's a spiritual walk. And originally, what the intent with the walking the Camino is you set out on that trail with nothing, no food,
Oh,
the clothes on your back, and that was it. And that the universe would provide on that 400-mile walk. So you would be provided for. And that was the reason why it was a walk of faith. That was the reason why it was a pilgrimage, because you had to actually set out in the trail without nothing. So it's been very commercialized over the years. And now I don't think you could do that. I don't think you could do the Camino now with that original intent, because hundreds of people do it all the time. And it's I don't think you could do it without money now.
there
But
was a really wonderful story. I think you're right, Kim. I mean, money has been a real control for most of us. It allows us to not go far. And but that's all about to change as we learn more about the salt and the electricity in our body, and how we become more crystalline in our thought. And we're crystalline. When you look at crystal Christ,
there's a
it's the chrism oil around the hippocampus. And
there's a lot of concepts in relation to traveling, or the idea that you need money to travel, or that It's all a preconceived idea. And actually, you don't. You
No,
actually don't. You could actually set off today with the intention of getting somewhere, and you would actually get there without any money at all. It's completely possible because I've done it. I've
well,
got
look at our homeless population. We've got a whole community of people that just simply, I
live,
personally don't know why I would travel. I would start walking, head
yeah,
south
just start
at least,
walking.
why live in such a cold climate? I would get out of here for sure
Yeah.
and know that I can feed myself and find, fruit and such in a warmer climate year round.
Mhm.
But people are really suffering, and if you don't see it coming, you can't walk. You get to a point where you become so weak, and it's very sad to see.
Mhm.
But I think you're reminding me when you talk about Shirley MacLaine's book. I was reminded of The Alchemist. Such a great
Oh
journey
yeah.
across the desert.
Yeah.
Discovering who he
Yeah.
is, and
Yeah.
such a wonderful. It's a representation of the journey that we're on right now.
So
That's
that
why I say we're a little lost in the desert, but we're
with the
finding our way.
with the Shirley MacLaine book, the reason that I was talking about it was because of Jane's reference to Atlantis, because she actually incorporates Atlantis into that story and
Oh, I didn't know that.
the memory of it. Um, but sometimes when I go to reread something, I read something the first time that isn't there the second time.
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe it's my
It makes perfect
imagination.
sense to me because we just sort of this happens to me often when reading. I have to often go back and read it again because my mind is in
Yep.
another place
Yep.
simultaneously, and I'm very
Yeah.
aware of that.
Yeah.
So I get, that sort of, I really have to slow down and say, okay, I didn't catch a thing. I read it, but it didn't go in.
Anyway, that book's interesting. She
Yeah.
put some very interesting points forward in it, and I really enjoyed it at the time of reading it. It's 20 years ago since I read it, but it was based upon her experience of doing the Camino. Anyway, James,
That's
do you
fascinating.
know anything about the Camino at all?
No, I don't know anything about that. But there's something you said a little while ago, and I thought, well, actually, you have got it again today. You have got a pilgrim. It's a pilgrim age that we live in. Most people do
Mm.
make a pilgrimage to go and get tablets.
Pilgrim.
So, but
Hmm.
I looked at this description of Plato's description of Atlantis. Now, if you put that in a tribal context, when you set up your encampment of tents or teepees, you would presumably have the chief in the middle. Then you would have your healer, the one that's trained to be the oracle with the history of that tribe, and they'd recite it. They go through years and years of reciting it word perfect, not like we're told about Chinese whispers. They were trained over a long period of time. You'd have your sort of your key figures maybe forming that next circle around the main teepee. Then you'd have a series of circles around that. And then if you look at town and city plans, you've basically got the same patterns today. And historically, you'll have your library, your town hall, your government buildings, and then you'll have the houses and shops and things radiating out around that, and you have ring roads. Well, so you've got the same pattern even today of this description of Atlantis. So that's not really changed that much. It's just it's been written in such a way that to sort of hide the truth of it.
Yeah.
So a perfect example is the capital city of Ireland, Dublin. Now I can't speak Gaelic, but so I can only read it as like an English word. So you've got Baal, Atha, Clea. So one of their deities that's associated with the sun is Baal or Baal. So you can see where that's been misappropriated and flipped over. Ulster, basically, it means due star. Yule UIL is in Gaelic. It means blood. So you can see where they've taken that one. So you can also see where we get the modern day word fuel for like petrol and diesel. It comes from that UIL again.
Blood.
So they've really flipped things around so much.
It came to my awareness the other day, salt, salary. You know, that was interesting. I thought there's certainly a connection
Salt.
there because when
Because
you
of
take into
salt.
the currency and the salary,
And
you
the
know, we would
salt.
have been given worth our weight in salt, and you know, it would have been an allowance, or we would have had to, and watch the price of salt, folks, as we start to learn about the importance of it in these mineral salts, and as well as the value of it in terms of supplying energy to the body, and also to our it's free energy, and they're trying to introduce it as new technology. I'm not buying it. I feel like it's very old tech, and they're trying to introduce it as this new discovery. And but watch for the price of salt and get good, valuable, good quality salt while you can. I mean, I don't want to create like a toilet paper frenzy or anything like that, but you know, make sure you have what you need. Get your minerals.
That doesn't mean
You've got
going out and buying 6 packets of Santa
No,
salt or something, like iodized. No, definitely not. It's like gotta be crystallized and
well, and the biodynamic plasma salts, you know, the tissue salts. These are micro doses of
yeah,
the true form of the mineral.
yeah.
So I think it's important to do your research, feel energetically, is this right for me? You know, decide for yourself. But Dr. Robert Selig, I love what he's releasing right now. I have followed him for many years, but just recently he's come back to my attention, and he's talking about the tissue salts and Dr. Carey's point of view. But he's speaking about it less through the lens of astrology and more through the lens of, well, what are the symptoms of these missing salts, which I think are really important, because he says it really doesn't matter if you're Taurus or Aries or Sagittarius. We're all in need. So if we're suffering in any way, there's likely one of 12 remedies available to us. There's no need for suffering. There's no need for invasive procedures. We really have been indoctrinated with our belief that these ones in the white coats are our friends. And I think that, you know, they sometimes intend to be, but they are not. Their medicine is kind of witchy. I'm going to say it. It's
well,
dark.
in a survey that was done, 98% of doctors went into the profession for the money. So that
Oh,
will
yeah.
tell
Well, and I saw a survey, 75% in Canada would not recommend certain things for their own family members. You know, most of what they offer, they wouldn't give to their own families.
Well,
And that's how
perhaps.
I would sort of guide myself through their system, is to ask them that question. Would you do this? You know, and I would feel for their response, you know, because they're all scripted, and they've signed confidentiality agreements. They can't even tell the truth if they want to.
But I must
That's why
admit,
it's been silent.
recently I personally went to see the doctor, and I'd I'd been having problems balancing my blood sugar. I haven't got that problem anymore because I took control of it with my diet. But at the time, I had problems balancing my blood sugar, and one of the tablets he prescribed for me, he said that the side effect of that drug was might give me pancreatitis. And
Well,
I
there's so
came,
many side effects to be aware of,
I came home
and
and
they
said,
tell us.
why would I, like he openly said that to me. A possible side effect of this is pancreatitis. And I asked, is pancreatitis curable? And he said, no.
Yeah, possible side effect death. you know.
Okay, so I
Oh,
came home and
you're afraid of our approach? You must be crazy.
you're afraid of the truth. I just couldn't
Uh,
believe that it was that blatant and that kind of like in your face
yes. And we're just not reading because, like I say, we've come
or
to trust
listening.
these people. We've watched the TV shows and we know that those are the ones that we go to for help. We've been taught how to behave. You know, our whole society has been brought up on a Disney movie.
Tell me.
And they've created orphans out of all of us. This is why I think inner child work is so important because even those of us that had a wonderful upbringing, I feel isolated, alone, abandoned, not understood. You know, even if they've had a strong family unit, I think that quiet part of us doesn't feel no, cannot feel recognized. And this is where so much of our suffering comes from because we just want to be accepted. But we'll have the leader of the home tell us how to behave. It has to be this way. This is the only way. No allowance is made for where that person may have landed on the chart. And astrology is a big deal when we're looking at our holistic nature. When we look at, I mean, you could have a real tyrant for a parent. Well, that could just simply be because you're on opposite sides of the wheel and you cannot see things the same. You know, it's a very different experience. It's an expression of, I think where we're at and why it's important for us to do that inner work and harness the energy of the solar plexus,
Okay,
the
just
child,
gonna
the child in all of us.
I'm just gonna jump subject for a moment. So we're kind of like almost 3 months into this year now, and
Mhm.
both of you earlier on, I think before we went live, were talking about what this year was about. So to you, Ginger, having I mean, we're not 3 months. We're 2 full months into the year in 3 days. But
I again think the year begins on March 21st, and I always do, I always will. I see nature come back to life. It's a shift in the season here, and it's when Aries arise Aries. It's the beginning and it's the start of the year as we come back to life from our deep slumber of the winter months. And so for me, I know in this country we believe it's January 1st, but for me it's March 21st, and it's the spring equinox. And that's thing number one. The second thing about this month is that most of the planets are shifting positions. We're going to notice that. I think some of us are feeling it, but we don't know exactly what that is that we're feeling. Take a deep breath, get quiet as much as you can, and just allow your spirit to guide you because you will get information. But so many of us are still in ego and worried about or arguing with that little bit of insight that we're given. And so this
all right,
especially is a time to tune to the direction that you're receiving and to try and be in the flow of it because everything is shifting and it can be for the better, but it can also be chaotic when we go through these changes.
okay. Well, I want to come back to that in a sec because I want to ask James that question. But there's something that you prompted me to think about there, which is it's actually a year now since I gave up smoking,
Wow,
and I'd
congrats.
smoked my whole life, and then just gave up cold turkey. No assistance at all. But one of the things that really, really, really helped me, and this isn't to encourage anybody because I think that each of us has our own right to smoke or not smoke. But one of the things that actually blew my mind with it was I was talking to my sister one night who's she has her own yoga school in Scotland. And she was telling me that she thought that the reason it was difficult for me to give up smoking was because of the breathing in association with smoking. So when you smoke, you go, and she was telling me that if I do that breath anyway, like if I get the urge to smoke and do the breath as if I'm smoking but without the cigarette, that it would be easier for me to overcome the urge to smoke because it's actually the breathing that I miss, not the cigarette. And I did it and it worked. So I just thought I'd let you know that bit
I
of
appreciate that.
information.
That is a very important piece of information for everyone because
Yeah,
it clears the energy. And if you're feeling like, oh, I need a cigarette, sometimes that's not what you need at all. It is
it's
just to take
it's
that deep, deep breath and to
it's too,
become aware of how closed we can be and, to really open up and get our battery flowing again
yeah,
and just shift our attention onto something else. It can be that simple if that's
okay.
what we choose.
Okay.
So
If
for
that's what
people
you choose,
suffering,
there's no
yeah.
influence regardless. I
Oh,
mean,
I think it's so important, though. I think it's an important message for sensitive people to hear because I do feel that most smokers are quite sensitive,
yeah,
and they've made these cigarettes so expensive. You know, um, I don't know. I think it'll only hurt you if you think it will.
yeah, I agree. I agree.
You
So
know, so
so James, just to go back to what you think this this year has shown us before and where you think we're going with it this year, this energy that we're in. And that was it, James, because I missed you out before.
It's okay. Well, I take March. Well, I said Happy New Year for March the 1st because you've got this 10-day skip and an 11-day skip in 1582 and I think it's 1752, where they've changed from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar to bring the vernal equinox back in line. So I'm taking March the 1st as the sort of start, but you've then got this alchemical marriage, 21 days. The coming of age is 21. So I feel that's also expressed in that. So the two halves of the brain, you've got 21 days to sort of bring them into alignment. Smoker's cough. But also, it's like, well, I don't know what's true and what's not true about all this, what's allegedly sprayed in the sky. But what if by smoking, I'm actually adjusting myself so I become resilient? So anything that's up there that may be being sprayed and sort of dropping down, I'm already adjusting the body by smoking because they make it quite clear in black and white. It says tobacco smoke contains over 70 substances known to cause cancer. So most people are just going to see tobacco and cancer. But it doesn't tell you that tobacco causes cancer. It's that the other substances that have been added that may cause cancer. It's very cleverly worded. But of course, trying to find the list of ingredients or what those substances are, it's like everything else. It's like you're half told the thing, but not the full story, same as history and everything else. There's a saying that came back into my head earlier when you describe someone as being salt of the earth. That must have some sort of true sort of, do we say, esoteric meaning to that, I would have thought.
Yeah, Ginger's
I would
got
be
a take on that with regards to the salt being representative of the four signs of the zodiac.
the
Scorpio,
four fixed signs.
the four fixed signs. Scorpio being the S, Aquarius being the A, Leo being the L, Leo being the L, and Taurus being the T. And
Correct.
therefore you've got the fire, water, earth, and air.
I think it would be important also to look at the minerals for each of those. Like I know that Leo is magnesium. I don't know if I have my book available, but I do think it would be important to look to see which minerals are involved here for that acronym, because I think that there's some value in that, some knowledge there. But I also know that the salt is what lights us up. It's the phosphorus, it's the light, it's luminescent, it's sonoluminescent. Very cool.
That's another thing is we're often taught if our blood pressure's high that it's because of our intake of salt. Um, but it's the wrong type. It's the wrong type. Oh, no, anyway, sounds like we're advising on a medical basis, and I'm not.
Oh, we're not. No,
No.
always encourage exploration, not experts.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important for us to open our minds up to the possibility that there is more that we can do to help ourselves
Yes.
and, you know, light ourselves up a little bit more.
Yeah.
So many of those minerals are phosphoric in nature, and the phosphor is the light. So to
Okay.
have the light restored to the body and to become more electric, it's or more fully charged. When you look at the symptoms, like I like how Dr. Selig presents it because he breaks it into the symptoms, and I think that's what's most important because we can identify with how we feel, and then attempt, you know, do a little bit of research about these minerals and see if it feels right to you, and consult experts if you can.
Yeah. So, James, just in relation to what do you think that the energy of this year, you said earlier what it was, and I can't remember what you said.
I feel it's pretty much as often speculated. It's a year of disclosure, a year of revelation. Now, I don't feel it's going to be sort of released government secret documents. It's more going to be an inner knowing, like a spiritual download that comes to us. I've said that I had this feeling since January that this spring is going to be enormous for all of us, depending on what vibration you're on and how much of that sort of negative default programming you've sort of addressed, and that doing that inner work and facing the shadow side will determine how much of a sort of revelation and disclosure this year will be. But certainly, I've been sent a link to this book about the Gaelic, because there'd been hints there that take the woman's name Siobhan. Well, it's a B and an H together that's pronounced like a V, and I never sort of I was curious about it, but never sort of followed up on it. And it's like, well, this is given another bit of the puzzle. I feel we can reverse engineer, as it were, by looking across many channels, looking at the common ground of what they're showing, and we can sort of
Is Siobhan,
reconstruct.
is Siobhan the one that's spelled Siobhan?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And it's a B and an H, and yet it's pronounced V.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's weird that.
but it's a like a pure Gaelic spelling, and it's like that. I'm sort of not annoyed with myself, but it's like, why didn't I pick up on that before? That's been presented to me several times, and it's like I never sort of put that in the context of words and phonetics and language and things. But now it sort of makes sense with everything else. It's
And
like,
that's just a name, Siobhan.
yeah,
And it's the same with in Welsh. Like I'll never forget, Llanelli is K, which is double L. Double L is K, pronounced K. I don't know why double L would be pronounced K.
well, you've got. I looked at. It comes up as a suggested Google search question: can Irish Gaelic and Welsh Gaelic understand each other? The Welsh Gaelic is closer to the Cornish,
Right.
so it would depend on sea levels, because there are maps showing that the whole of the British Isles and Ireland are part of a much bigger landlocked area. I mean, I go with the idea that we had this vapor canopy where 99% of the water was, this salt water was up above. It was maybe the salt, it's electromagnetically stuck. It's, if you can imagine above us being like the lens of an eye. I mean, when you get an emotion, you get the waters come from above when they come out as tears. You have your own version of a flood. So there's many mentions of land bridges between India and Australia, for example. So what about the rest of the world? I feel that we had maybe rivers and streams. We didn't have these great big oceans, and you could sort of walk vast distances, maybe need boats and things for just across rivers. Oh, while I think of it as well, the Gulf of Mexico is shown on some maps as the Red Sea as well. So thinking of an exodus, certainly with the Mayans, that dye comes from the Florida.
Beginning to sound like Nigel and his paste and copy world, you know, when you were talking about the Nile Delta being the same as the Mississippi Delta, and then the Gulf of Mexico being the same as did you say the Dead Sea or the Black Sea?
No, you've got Salt Lake, and then you've got the Dead Sea, which is full of salt.
Yeah.
So, but
and why call the Dead Sea full of salt? The Dead Sea. What's the story there? Full of salt.
Highly radioactive. Nothing can survive in it. Things turn to they petrify.
Right.
There's the birds and things that have just they're totally untouched, but they've turned to sort of like a salt rock.
Yeah, because it's the limestone. It's the limestone content in it. It gets coated in limestone. If you go to Mother Shipton's cave in Knaresborough, it's actually the waterfall comes out the front of it, over the top of it, but the water's actually got a very high limestone content. And then what somebody's done, or what she did, what Mother Shipton was famous for in the kind of 16th century or something, was turning things to stone. But what they've done in the modern day version of her cave is they've tied washing line across the front of it, and people have stuck shoes on it or stuck teddy bears on it. And you can see all these depictions of things turned to stone, which you can imagine in the 16th century must have been terrifying. I'll show bring you a picture up. It must have been terrifying for people in the 16th century to see all these things turned to stone. I'm going to share the screen and
I
show
think
you
it
what I
was
mean.
recently, it might have been Mind Unveiled, before I forget, was saying something about there being like a ring. And I'm wondering about Hadrian's Wall being part of that ring. And the other part would be the China Wall and the Mississippi. When you brought that up, James, it reminded me of something. I think it was Mind Unveiled, but I'm not sure. And I would add Hadrian's Wall to that. He was talking about Mississippi and the China Wall and the similarities between the two, and they found what they believe is also the China Wall along the Mississippi.
When you
The China Wall.
I know that's separate, Tim, but it's sort of not.
I looked at the word Hebron, and that just sounds almost like a Hebrew word. And I thought,
what was it, James? I didn't hear you, sorry.
I thought, what would Hadrian come out in, or sorry, Hedron come out in Gaelic? And it's very similar to Hadrian. And I thought, and looking at that like Hadrian's Wall.
Hadron Collider, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, the Hadron Collider.
Right.
If you look
and
at
then Mississippi and Nile, is it Nile or the Nile Delta, right? Or no, the China Wall, sorry.
I was going to say, if you look at the Hadrian's Wall and the other one, I can't remember the name of it, that's not far away. That looks as if it's built to be a defense against something coming from the south, not something built by the Romans to keep the Picts and the Scots out.
And it's the same from China. So the Great China Wall, it's the same. Like if you look at the actual, the way it's built, it's to keep them from out of Tartaria, is how I see it.
I mean, it's hilarious.
That wall was built to keep the Tartarians safe. That was part of the.
Because the entrance to the wall's on the wrong side of it.
Correct.
If you look
So
at
it's
where
the
the
same
entrance
story
is,
potentially for
it-
Hadrian's Wall.
the entrances to the wall are all on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Like,
Just they are telling us
logic.
what they want us to believe, and we believe them. So just because somebody tells you, I guess it's not enough. It's important to really check your facts and talk to people who live in that area, explore. And, if we're going to adopt new beliefs at this time, I think it's very important that we have some certainty or evidence that feels like it hasn't been corrupted in some way. To sell a best-selling novel or a movie or whatever,
Unless it's
or
fiction.
a new
Unless
product, right?
unless it's fiction, in which case it's fine. Free for all.
And then tell it, say it's fiction.
The thing that a lot of people pick up on is in the word believe, they always say you've got lie right in the middle of it. Which, yeah, fair enough. But what about the other side? If you take lie out of believe, you're left with be even. Well, to me, that is saying the Eve is the divine feminine. The womb of creation, where imagination creates reality, is on that divine feminine side. And that's the one thing, particularly with the Vatican religion, it's been very anti-women all the way through. And all this thing about witches are normally straight away, if you say witches, people think of women, they don't think of men.
No.
So it's very much following this anti-life, because obviously with women, the female body, it's what brings new life into this world as well. So it's been an all-out attack. All it
They
needs
just want us
really,
to be a bunch of prostitutes.
all we really need to sort of change things is something with a structure like the tribal way. So there is no incentive for personal greed. So say if I was a tribesman and it's like, right, I'm going to steal, I've got a horse, but I'm going to steal 2 more horses. If I'm shunned from that tribe, there's no guarantee another tribe is going to welcome me in. I've now got 3 horses. I've got a problem. I've got to feed them. And I've got no land of my own to, and I'm now having to do everything from my, it's going to be of no benefit to try to steal anything from the tribe. We've lost that sort of community spirit. They've done a lot. This is with this shifting of populations is another way to encourage this. Putting people who are now so culturally different next to each other. It's like, let's almost spark civil wars everywhere for this purpose. It's the same divide. Because
It doesn't benefit us. Who are we fighting? We're fighting each other. These people that sit holding the puppet strings, they don't get their hands dirty. We've got to learn not to do that. I think we have. But, fear is a big part of this experience that we're having. And if people get triggered and lose control, it wouldn't take much to tip the scales.
I actually like being triggered, because if I'm being triggered, so the first thing I do is turn the question inside myself and think, why am I feeling triggered? What is there any word? Is it, have I got a belief system that I feel I've got to defend? So I won't attach to any sort of labels as much as possible. I don't identify with a particular nation. To me, the only nation is imagination, and I'm in the United States of love, because I can see where they've taken all these things and flipped them over to mean something else than what they originally mean, all as part of this confusion.
Well, and I think we've become quite used to looking for outside influences, like even like road signs and things like that. When we leave our little abode, we go out into the world and we're looking for permission. Permission to drive, permission to, can I go on that road? Oh no, only on this road. We don't, again, we think we have freedom, but we actually don't. And we are the ones setting those restrictions in place. We're the ones building the walls now around our big estates that, unless we've got a tribe of people, we're not going to be able to manage them. So it's very important that we learn to live in community with one another, I think, and to become more tribal and to look for the needs of community and ways to solve problems and to become very open and do things the way I think that they were once done. This force of energy that came along was quite destructive and it rewrote our history, all right. We have absolutely forgotten who we are. And, it's all speculation what we bring here now. And you're right, James. I think it's important for us to look at all of that because we learn new things and we can add to the conversation sometimes. I love what Dr. Selig is bringing again, because it's a more scientific perspective and a little less astrology. So it's brilliant to see that bridge be built. I think
I
that
like
we
that.
can do it. I love it, and I believe we can, but we have to get over that ego part of us. Well, I invested all this money and I have all this money and I need all this money and it's money, money, money that really keeps the ego afloat. And, it's important for us to give thanks for what we've got and really build with what we already have, everything that we need. We're constantly searching. And, I think it's important for us to take inventory and make use of what we've already got around us.
I don't see money as such as being evil. So even if we were saying a tribal situation, it would be a promissory note because at that particular time, say it's an exchange of particular fruits and vegetables. One has got a surplus, the other one, because they're seasonal, they're not quite ripe enough to pick. So you'd give a promissory note and say, right, when these are ripe, and I will give you, and then obviously your word has got to be your bond. Then. But it's an individual agreement between two, not a controlled by a thing that wants to then take a bit of it, a percentage of it, everything. Because taxes don't just stop with having that being a purse on, i.e. an open purse. So it's like, yeah, take the tax out of it, take the national insurance out of it. Oh, and I'm still paying tax for everything I buy. So I'm being taxed. It's all an tax on our spiritual wealth.
It's an attack, all right. It's an attack.
I used to do readings at this market, right? On a Sunday, I used to go and do tarot readings about 10 years ago, a bit longer than 10 years ago. Did it for probably 10 years every Sunday. Anyway, I had this dream one night, and the next day, a guy came into the tent, a guy and his wife actually. And at that time, a friend and I were doing readings together, and the wife sat down next to her and had a reading, and he sat down opposite me. And I said, "Did you want a reading?" And he said, "No, no, I'm just sitting waiting for my wife to finish." And I said, "Oh, well, since you sat there opposite me, I'm going to tell you about a dream I had last night." So in this dream, my higher self comes down and says to me, "I'm going to take you to the markets." And my higher self has a wheelbarrow full of manure, cow manure. And he pushes the cow manure into the market, and he chooses some oranges that are in a pyramid shape. And he does a conversation with this guy and decides to exchange these oranges for the cow manure. And he puts his hands in the cow manure and he starts handing the pats over for the number of oranges that he's exchanged, right? And then he turns to me and he says to me, "Money's shit." And he said, part of the reason that we've got such a big problem with money in our society is because so many people are living off credit, which means that they're buying something with something that hasn't yet been earned. So there's a breakdown in the energy because we're living as if we own something that we haven't yet worked for. So the exchange is not there anymore, like the cow pats represented. Anyway, I told this story to this guy who sat in my tent, and he looks at me and he said, "You got to be joking." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because I'm the biggest manufacturer of cow manure in Brisbane. And I just said, there's no coincidences in this world. And no,
None.
yeah. I just thought it was a sort of, and then this morning I'm thinking about the Ace of
That's what came
Pentacles.
up as you were telling that story.
That's what came to mind.
That's what came out.
Really? So
That's mastery over the money, right?
the,
Mastery over the earthly realm. It's about the poop. It's all coming from poop, all of our food.
yeah,
We're very
yeah,
dependent upon it. And then we put it
yeah,
in our water, which makes no sense to me. Why
yeah,
are we putting it in the water?
yeah,
We need it on the soil.
yeah. So this morning I was thinking about the amazing coincidences though, or synchronicities that happen in our life. And I know this is one of James's favorite acknowledgements, but if we look at these amazing synchronicities as like gifts, or like being blessed with the idea that this is confirmation, that's like heavenly realms coming down, and then confirming a situation to you, confirming something to you that's real.
It felt
And
real. When I saw that card, I thought its timing was quite perfect.
yeah,
As we were
yeah,
talking about the energy of money, you
yeah,
know, it's all, we really have opportunities galore. And like always, there's always an opposite. So to say it's evil would be ridiculous. Of course, it's not. It's what we do with it. It's our intention behind that energy. And no matter what the energy is, whether it's the energy of money or love, or no matter what the energy is, it's our intention. It's the feeling that creates the story.
and where
It's the
where
feeling that creates the thought.
where it becomes evil is the greed and the feeling
Oh, yeah.
of lack,
And fear. Fear, I think.
fear of lack, fear of not
Correct.
having enough. I mean, you
And not
don't,
having control.
and not being able to. I mean, it's always in the now, like there's never a time when, or there might be a time where you come to a stage where you can't pay a bill, but maybe it's at that time where you need to look at an alternative to that bill. Like, really good example is our electricity bill here at the house. It's hundreds of dollars less than it was a few years ago, and it's only
That's right.
because I took out my electric hot water system and put a gas one in that's just, like it just turns on when you need it and turns off. So
Yeah.
I'm not paying for hot water storage, electric hot water storage anymore. It costs a lot of money there. And it's,
Well, and the smart appliances too, I find on my hydro bill, the same thing. The hydroelectric bill it plummeted
yeah,
compared to, the old tech that we were using. My
yeah,
my bill was quite high. So just even upgrading appliances can make an enormous difference.
yeah,
But at
yeah,
the same time, these things are not built to last. I can say that.
no,
There's an attachment. They'll make it better for us all, right? And save us money on that end, but you'll be replacing them every 5 years.
yeah. My auntie had a fridge that she'd had since 1927 or something, her whole life. One of these great big, do you remember those sort of like uh metal door handle that you pull,
Oh, yes, yeah.
um and
Like an
great
ice
big
box.
yellow thing, but she had this
Yeah.
fridge her whole life, never changed it.
I don't see why change it if it works.
Mm,
We were talking about fishing rods yesterday, and once upon a time, a person would buy a fishing rod, and that would have been a lifetime purchase.
mm,
And they were built to last, and
mm.
and now they're not. They're very flimsy and they break easily, and even something so simple as a fishing rod, the technology, we can do better. We will. We did actually, I feel, once upon a time, and we somehow decided to become more commercial in our ways. We had to set goals and targets and sales and sales and sales. you know, How about we just worry about having what we need and not worry so much about having the
We've
greed,
also
you know?
we've become compartmentalized. So you're in this job and you're just doing this. I mean, from a business point of view, it's like, well, if I sell you something, it's going to last you the rest of your life. Well,
Yes.
I need customer, so I need the thing to be designed to have so much life in it, but then it's also designed to fail after so many years. So you got to come back for another one. It creates this dependency thing. But if we were more multi-skilled as we would have once been, you might well, an example that comes readily to mind is the man's suit. It was tailored. It would be the equivalent of buying a sports car today. So you have that one suit that is going to last you the rest of your life because it is so expensive to buy. It's not off the peg, one size fits all like you've got today. It's tailored to fit your dimensions, because it's ridiculous to me how you can have something based just on the collar size. But what about the length of the arms? Because I've seen tall people, the sleeves are sort of up the arm, and then on shorter people, the sleeves are practically covering the hands, but it's all on the chest size or the collar size. That's ridiculous. So, but yeah, we've lost
It's
skills a lot.
it's so ridiculous. I'm gonna have to make my own clothes. I just cannot find simple clothes with pockets and now I'm not crazy about today's fashion. It's like I'm just gonna have to do it. That's how I feel. And it can be so simple, but we've made it very complex and plastic. So much of our clothing is plastic and it's made to be thrown away. You know, so much of it gets tossed if it doesn't get sold. It's such a waste. And again, opportunities for people who, you know, the seamstresses. If you're thinking about starting a business, do it. You know, do it. I'll buy it.
This is that sort of reminded me of something else. You've got as well as Tara being the center of the remnants of Atlantis from the spiritual perspective, out of that you've got Tartaria, and you've also got Tarthan, and like Old World Florida, and Karimo Ahu channel was shown. You've got the Micmac tribe in particular that wore tartan, and obviously Mick comes from the Irish, Mac comes from the Scottish. But you've got Caledonian, Chaldean, you've got Gaelic, Galilee, you've got Hibernia, Hebrew, Iberia. You've got this common words. It's like, well, how can that be? I'd been looking at it the wrong way round. I'd been looking at coming from the east, but now it's like the picture emerges that maybe Atlantis was in that sort of Gulf of Mexico or very near to it. It makes sense. You've got Hades, the pillars of Hades and things. There's so many, they're not just coincidences between that sort of fertile crescent. It's just been since 2018, they found over 1,000 settlements in Guatemala. One of them is the size of Las Vegas, and they're all interconnected with these roadways. And it's been sort of detected with the LiDAR. So
Are you talking about beneath the sea? Well, I mean, I had a conversation with that in a dream state with a guy from Atlantis, a higher being. And what he was telling me was that Atlantis is a vibration. It's still there. It's just our vibrations too low to reach it.
I agree.
So
these floating cities. I forget. Jason mentions it on Archaics. All
yes.
of our could see this crystal city in the sky,
Yeah.
but people see it. So there's obviously something opened up, a frequency that it sort of revealed itself and then disappeared again. And I feel a lot of this is all down to what frequency you're on, because
Yeah, but how can you trust anything these days? Because I mean, if you they're just so clever with photography these days. How can you know? I mean, if a city appeared in the sky, even outside the front door of my house, I would just think it was somebody messing about with CGI or some sort of holographic mimicry or some sort of holographic technology. I wouldn't think for a minute it was real.
That's
I,
good because I think a lot of us would be afraid if we saw that. I did have an experience once that nobody else was having. I can see another atmosphere sort of entering our atmosphere, and it was potent. It almost took me to my knees. It was so potent to have this experience. But what was most bizarre is that nobody else could see it or feel it, and it was incredible. It was like it looked like another sphere entering our atmosphere. And I could certainly feel it. I was at a beach and everybody else was just playing, not noticing a thing.
wow.
Yeah, maybe I was tripping, but I don't think so because things really heated up after that. Things really changed, I think, for us. One other thing I wanted to back up to, James was talking about the spray earlier, and I often think of the spraying as like the wake of a ship. Like when you look up and you see the spraying, what if it's not spray at all? What if it's the wake of a ship, the waters above and below? We come from the waters. We're born in the amniotic fluid, and we are of the water. We are Atlantis. We are the Atlanteans, and we are rising. So Atlantis is rising, just like the phoenix.
So you're talking about the chemtrails there. You're saying
Yes.
what if it's
What
just
if it's
water?
a ship's wake? What if it's a ship's wake? The waters above. Somebody once said, I asked a fish once, how's the water? And the fish said, what water?
Yeah. And then the other thing, I don't know whether you've seen the depictions of comets. Have you seen the depictions of comets? And somebody said, well, actually, that could be a hole in the firmament. That could actually be a hole where the sun's shining through. Have you seen that?
A hole where the sun's shining through? No, but
Yeah.
I saw a star in a jar the other day that I thought was amazing.
A
It's
what?
sonoluminescence. It's a star in a jar. And I can't remember the person's name. Was it Oracle 63 maybe? Don't quote me. I'll share the link after if that's okay, Kim. And but it was really fascinating. And they talked about how our sound, so they used a sound bubble. The person refused to call it a sound wave. He said, if you go underwater and you try and speak, you're not going to see waves, you're going to see bubbles.
Right.
So the bubbles contain the sound. And when the sound bubble hits, there's, when it hits a certain way, they can create a star in a jar. So again, back to our sound, how it creates, our words create. So this sound bubble hits this object in a jar and it creates a star like energy. It's very cool. Star in a jar.
I've got it. I've got it here. I'll play it for you. Hold on.
Oh, that's
I'll just
great.
take the I'll just take the sound off it before I play it and make sure the advert, and then I'll show the screen.
So again, we have to question our perception of absolutely everything, which is kind of draining. Because we've come to know things a certain way, but you have to wonder, is this true?
All
Why
right,
do I believe that?
hold on. I've lost my bit. Oh, there you go. Share screen. Sharing my screen. This is the solar luminescence that you're talking about, the star in the jar.
Is that the one, Kim? Oh, brilliant. A great video. And yeah, I can't remember what they called that little wave in the middle. Like there was something in the middle of the jar, and then they hit it with sound, and then it just became this a magnificent star.
Wow. I mean, I
So,
have always thought that the stars are a sound vibration.
well,
And
and that
I
takes us back to the sword and the stone, and
and
you know,
I can even say that at a guess, I would think that I'm just going to stop sharing. Oh, I can show you the comment thing as well. I was talking about
great
like
video.
that
That looks like a star in a jar to me. When you said that about comets, that's what I
Yeah.
was reminded of.
yeah. So just gonna stop sharing. The I can't remember what I was gonna say there. Go on. You talk because I can't remember what I was gonna say.
No pressure, James. Where'd you go? Yeah, but a spray or a wake? Is it a wake, that we see? Perhaps the waters above.
What about the word? Awake and awake.
I know. Like we look at that word, we think of the wake of a ship waking in the morning, the wake of a funeral.
Yeah.
What are we looking at anyway? Ache, A-C-H-E.
Mm. Right,
Lots
You
there.
James.
also
What were you gonna say?
so you've also got that expressed in the Star Wars film. You've got these little tribal people called Ewoks, which is like an anagram of wake. But what if you look at the human body, the way where we're told about it, you shed dead cells. So what if what is going on in the macro to the micro is, if we're part of a body of something, it's just casting off dead cells. I feel also it's no coincidence if you commit murder, you've deprived the system of being able to harvest that human energy. So to pay for that, you're confined. So you're now generating more of a negative energy to make up for the one that you've murdered. So they're doing a double harvest off of a prisoner of your energy. You've freedom, you're confined, you're told when you can eat and what you can eat and all this sort of thing. So yeah, it's like, it's strange how we've got these words, but then how they're applied, it's like, well, that's the same word, skin cells and prison cell. And it's like,
And a plant has cells. There's cells everywhere. Battery cells, blood cells.
And selling. Sell. I sell you a car.
Selling, yes.
Mm. Mm. Wow.
Well, also, I think it might be in Italian. It's pronounced as cell. It's salt.
Correct.
Yeah.
French, S-E-L, cell.
Probably in Spanish, I think it's cello as well. So this is this.
But like water, I do think it's an acronym because salt on the periodic table is Na. And then if you look at the word China, C-H-I, Chi, life force energy, Na. And then, but no, S-E-L, it's obviously salt. What does it all mean?
Then you
I think the answers are in the English language because this is where the spell is cast. This is where the Maggie, if you will, perhaps took over and rewrote our language.
I've no doubt
I say
doing
it's the magician from the last millennium. And now we're in the millennium of the high priestess.
I remembered what I was going to say when I forgot.
Sorry, Kim. Go ahead.
So what I was going to say was, I think that the stars are, wow, it's a really big story. This, and not one that I'm really able to communicate at 11 o'clock at night. It's too much for me. So I think that the stars are communicating to us through the tones, and they're influencing us through the tones, and that's the ringing that we hear in our ears.
Some refer to that as the music of the spheres.
Yeah.
I think of Annie Williams as an interesting person to look at for the wisdom of the Egyptians on sound. Annie Williams. And she has, I can't think of the name of the video, but there's a few beautiful videos of her teaching us what it all means from a sound perspective.
Right. Your battery's beginning to go flat on your...
Mine?
So it's just getting a bit fuzzy. You can tell.
Okay.
I'm going to cut this off because I don't know how long we've been talking, but it must be like a couple of hours or something.
Yeah, we're ready.
anything else that either of you would like to say before I go, or we go? No? James?
No, I think we covered a lot.
I'm having a senior moment. There was something, it's gone again.
That's a
I'm
sign. It's
pass,
time.
passing it on. All right, well,
Uh,
that was
I,
fun.
I think it's great, and I'm always looking forward to reading the comments and hearing what other people think. And,
Yep.
I think this year, again, one thing I did want to add is the year that we're in feels like a bigger collaboration already.
Yeah.
Like I see more people coming together and building already this wave of energy, unstoppable. We've got this.
And we're not so distracted, I don't think. I think before we were more disparate, more separate, there was more separation. Whereas now,
Yes.
like when we're talking, we're all on the same path or something. We're not all talking our individual subjects so much. We're all flowing onto each other more.
I think in sync and as I think we were already, and now that we're speaking it, it's really becoming synced up. So this collaboration as well,
Yeah.
it's powerful because now you two have a very large audience, and if people are tuning in, well, we just create a bigger ripple. And that's what it all is. It's just one big ripple of energy.
Yeah. Just like the star in the jar.
Correct.
Mm,
We are the star in the jar.
mm, mm. All right.
So I take it with the role of sort of playing, or we're all playing the part of the boy that pointed out and said the king is naked, he's got no clothes on, whereas the rest of the world is saying, oh, look at his wonderful outfit, because they're
Yeah.
worried about what they're true to themselves. But a lot of this is terminology. When we're talking about a year of disclosure, people automatically assume it's going to be some alien thing or something external. But look at the terminology we've got: terms and conditions, health and safety, community standards is another good one. It's always assumed it's talking about our community, but what if it isn't? My question is like, oh, you can't go there for health and safety reasons. Well, whose health and safety are we talking about? What is it going to uncover? You'll notice also demolishing buildings. It's not with a wrecking ball with lots of destruction. It's carefully dismantled behind wooden panels, so you can't see the foundations. I wonder why. Because where you can see through little gaps, you can often see brick window arches and things at ground level, and it's like, it's no wonder they've put boards around it, because the things are becoming too obvious. So I feel we have this, as Jason calls it, this benefactor aspect that is guiding and helping us and dropping little clues. And it's in films, you get it in songs, anything that's artistic and therefore is creative is from the good side. But obviously it's then hijacked, like with the music industry or the film industry. It's like, oh, we'll grab them. And I feel this is why you get a lot of these stories of some of these singers, they sort of go off the rails and turn to drink. They realize by then that they've got so far in, they can't get out. They're sort of stuck in the system. So their only escape is to turn to drink or drugs to try and blot out of like, oh dear, what have I done? I've sold my soul for fame, basically. But
Well,
I
and
feel
they become prisoners. They become prisoners in their own life, stars in a jar.
well, it's also the opposite. It's putting somebody up on a pedestal. They become a star. Word, you're a Hollywood star or a pop star, but they're not a star, not what we would call a star.
We
It's the
all
same
are
word.
the
Same word.
Vesuvius man, though. We all are stars. We are made of stardust.
But it could be shining in relation to energy.
Correct.
I mean, there's a certain energy that goes with being a star, which is again, it's like inward and outward breath. If they have a big following, they've also got a big outward breath. They've got a big influence in the world, and therefore they're shining, as in, not in, I mean, they don't shine, but actually some of them do. Some of them do shine, but it's more like the capacity for inward and outward breath, the capacity to influence the masses. One of the things that really, actually, just before we close, one of the things that really amazes me is how talented these stars are. Like they do everything. You know, they look good, they sing, they dance, they they just have this capacity to do everything.
They've had a very different experience than most of us.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are raised by other entertainers,
Yeah.
or let's call them handlers. Like if you look in the case of Celine Dion,
Yeah.
you know, her parents allowed her as a young teenager to disappear with this guy that appeared at their door one day.
Mm.
You know, they let their young teen go off and seek fame with this old man.
Mm. Mm.
I just don't think I could do it.
No.
My
No.
instincts would be screaming, no.
What an interesting name you've got there. Sell on, die on.
Thanks, James. That's great.
Salon Dion. Yeah.
And
Weird.
trying to normalize, like whether or not that story is even true, I don't know. Trying to normalize that story in the media. I don't know if it's an even true story. It sounds crazy.
I look at these words and then I'll say them over and over and I'll break them down into syllables, and it then seems to reveal a very different picture, because we're taught to hear a word in a particular way. And right now I can't think of an example, but a name like Abraham would be, I mean, you've got Abra and Ham. So it's a conflation. The other trick they do is take the first part of a word, say with the Irish Gaelic, and they'll attach Latin to the second half and create the word by a conflation of two to just further confuse things as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, AB is our blood type, A or B. You know, sometimes O. Abraham, Ra is the sun god, and Hem is not is another god. I think Hem is a major character in the Bible.
James, did you learn Latin in school?
No.
Okay.
That wasn't an option.
Okay.
No, that's only for the actors in the private schools.
Okay. I think I was just at that cusp. I think I learned it for a little while and then they took it off. I knew a bit of it. But even Latin, how much is Latin like Hebrew?
It seems to be an offshoot, but Latin implies to me it's something that's let in that wasn't here.
Right.
It's something concocted by a certain group against it.
Yeah, I know. All right. I'm really cutting it off now. Thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate your comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And any questions or whatever, by all means, free to say it. Thanks very much. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. I've got to stop recording.